is eating disorders amongst the young. It's Eating Disorder Awareness Week, and on BBC CWR's Make a Difference campaign, Wednesday always focuses around the issue of children's mental health. It's all part of our Happy Heads campaign here on BBC CWR. Well, Coventry and Warwickshire's mental health charity Rise say they've seen an increase in referrals for eating disorders during the pandemic. They say cases are going up here, a very similar rate to the national picture. NHS England say there's been a 62% rise in urgent cases of eating disorders between April and December of last year. Earlier on this week, I got to spend some time with 16-year-old Grace and her mum, Jackie. They live in Warwickshire. Grace has been living with anorexia for 4 years and told me how the pandemic has caused her to relapse.
Make a difference. Happy Heads.
BBC CWR.
It's fair to say that the first lockdown in March was very damaging for my mental health. The fact that I was kind of more in control of my time meant that my disordered thoughts could kind of really take a grip of me, and I could basically do what they were wanting me to do,
sure.
Which meant I did start doing online classes every day, which would start at kind of, I started doing it for like an hour and a half, and slowly I kind of fell into the cycle of doing it for longer and longer and longer until it got to about 2.5 hours, sometimes 3 every day. And I'd also go on long dog walks in the morning, and I really wasn't fueling my body enough for that either. And so I just slipped into a cycle of losing a lot of weight very quickly. And obviously, when you're already struggling with an eating disorder and disordered thoughts, it just makes them worse and worse. So I had quite a significant relapse over the summer.
Jackie, it must really hurt you to hear your daughter speaking like this, to have watched her suffer the way she has.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that anorexia is a horrendous illness, both for the poor sufferer and also for the family around them. What I would say, though, is I'm so proud of Grace for being able to articulate her struggles this morning, because that takes a huge step of bravery, both to acknowledge the level of illness you were in and to put the work in to recover. So, I am so incredibly proud of her for coming on and talking to you today. But yes, I think it is fair to say that the collateral damage of the illness cannot be underestimated.
Grace, I mean, again, to the innocent bystander, and even somebody listening to this morning, will be a sense of well, she sounds fine, sounds perfectly normal to me. That's the point, isn't it? I suppose really, it's very much what you've had to deal with is a hidden condition.
Yeah, I think that's something that people with anorexia suffer a lot with, is kind of oh, she looks fine, or oh, she sounds fine, because a lot of people have an image in their mind of what an anorexic looks like, or anyone suffering from any eating disorder. There's a very strong, almost stereotype, I guess, of what that person would be. And that is something that I have been told when I was definitely struggling. I have been told by doctors, oh, well, you look fine, and things like that. And that is incredibly unhelpful. And I know that that's a very widespread thing that people deal with. People who, by the BMI standards, which is flawed in itself, are not underweight, but are still struggling with an eating disorder. A lot of times they are not able to access the help because they look fine or they sound fine. And it is incredibly dangerous, this kind of stereotype and expectation of what an eating disorder would be like. And it's definitely true. I have spent a lot of years pretending, definitely at school or to people I didn't know as well, that I was fine. Because there's such like a stigma around eating disorders that a lot of the time it's easier to pretend that you're okay than kind of open up with what you're really going through.
I hope Grace won't mind me saying this, but a lot of people with anorexia are very bright, they're very determined, they're very focused, and it's very easy for them to hoodwink the professionals that they are actually a lot better than they are. I have the greatest respect for people who work in adolescent mental health because, let's face it, it's a tough job. They are probably underfunded, they are overstretched, and the stress on them as individuals, I think, cannot be underestimated. But the protocols that they need to follow, in our instance, family-based treatment, is basically send you home with a meal plan and get your child to eat it. And that is like saying take your child home and give them chemo when they don't want it.
Yeah, well.
This is the one thing they're terrified of is food and eating. Yeah. And you as a purely a parent, not a mental health professional, are left for all the time when you're not receiving any help from CAMHS to do that on your own at home, which is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, one of the things I've said is that, we all need kind of the equivalent of an anorexia nanny, somebody that will come into the home and coach you through how to get the food back into your child, because without that, nothing will start. This is a 24-hour-a-day illness, and very often when you need the support is when the 9-to-5 services are not available.
Grace, what do you think you've learnt about yourself over the last year or so?
Gosh, that's a really interesting question, actually. I think the main thing I've learned is kind of how capable I am at doing things when I put my mind to it. Like, recovering is definitely the hardest thing I've ever done. And a lot of times something I never thought I would be able to do. But really kind of deciding to recover and really pushing to recover, which I've started doing quite recently, it's really shown me kind of how strong and, as I said, how capable I can be when I really put my mind to it, which I think is quite a powerful realization.
I wish her the very, very best of luck in what is an ongoing challenge for her. These are issues, certainly when it comes to eating disorders, that don't just go away. They don't wake up one morning cured, eureka. It's something she may have to live with, certainly for, if not the rest of her life, certainly for a good proportion of the next few years of her life. Coventry and Warwickshire mental health charity Rise say they've seen an increase in referrals for eating disorders during the pandemic. And they say that cases are going up here very similar rate to that up and down the country. The NHS in England say there's been a 62% rise in urgent cases. Dr. Yolanda Giuanola is clinical lead for the Rise Eating Disorder Service across Coventry and Warwickshire. Joins us now. Dr. Giuanola, very good morning to you.
Oh, hello. Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thanks for being with us on CWR this morning. I mean, Grace's story there, and just listening to that, as I know you were, I'm guessing that's something you'll have heard a lot of over the last 12 months or so.
We have, sadly, yes. I think lockdown has put a spotlight on weight and exercise. And, many young people had just focused on healthy eating, and then in some cases develop into an unhealthy obsession and then into a diagnosable eating disorder. So, I think that Grace's history resonates with a lot of the stories that, we are hearing in our service, which, by the way, sorry, but it's not a charity. We are an NHS provider. Right. I just wanted to make clear.
Okay, so funded by the NHS, so very important to make that distinction. So clearly, you've seen an increase in demand for your services. How old are some of the children who are being referred to you?
We see children and young people up to the age of 18 years of age. And mostly we probably see children from the age of 11 or 12 upwards, really. Wow.
And I'm
our
hearing it's not just
trends.
It's not just girls, is it, that are approaching you?
No, it's girls and boys, and it affects everybody really, from every social background or cultural background, age. So we see quite variety of young people and very different presentations. Although of course they have a lot of common. Each person is different, and we have to be mindful of that.
In terms of the service you're able to provide, Yolanda, I mean, I imagine it can be very, very difficult, and especially at the moment, given the pandemic and the restrictions that are there. I mean, are you able to go out into the community? Are you able to do the kind of one-to-one assessment of people and the counselling and support that these people need, given the restrictions there are?
Well, I think that the pandemic has definitely made things quite difficult, for all services, really, not just for us. But we have continued to work. We have continued to assess people. We have continued to provide treatment intervention. It's not always face to face. Sometimes we do like remote. We have a video platform that we use, and sometimes, when appropriate, that's the what we use to deliver intervention. But I think it's, unfortunately, although there's been a lot of improvement in services for children and young people with eating disorders, the pandemic has really affected us. And we have started to develop a waiting list, which is something that we didn't have before. And I think that, that's the same across the country. It's not just in Coventry and Warwickshire, which is deeply concerning, really, because we know that the sooner we get people in, the better the prognosis. So we are fighting to really try to improve our service as much as we can.
One idea that Grace's mum, Jackie, had in that improvement of services. Just have a listen to this, Yolanda, and see what you make of this idea from Jackie.
I mean, one of the things I've said is that, we all need kind of the equivalent of an anorexia nanny, somebody that will come into the home and coach you through how to get the food back into your child, because without that, nothing will start. This is a 24-hour-a-day illness, and very often when you need the support is when the 9 to 5 services are not available. So I think if there was one thing that would enable us to have made the early stages quicker and more manageable and less traumatic, would be to have had somebody who was able to spend real decent amounts of time with us, helping us through. Because the one thing that they are terrified of, the sufferers are terrified of, is food. And food is their medicine. They've got every bone in their body screaming not to eat. And you have to make them. There are ways to make it easier and there are ways to make it harder. And we've all had some epic fails at doing that. But you have to, as a parent, be able to pick yourself up and go, OK, well, that didn't work, but we have to keep going, because that's what saves your child's life.
Good idea, that, isn't it? I mean, is that something you would consider, Yolanda, a kind of a diet buddy or a disorder buddy?
It's a lovely idea. It's a brilliant idea. I love it. I wish we could develop something like this. I think, at the moment we are far from being to develop, one-to-one treatment 24 hours a day. But what we're really hoping to develop, and we are, in discussions with our commissioners, is a community outreach team to deliver home-based treatment for people with eating disorders. So our hope is to be able to go into people's homes and support meal plans, support parents. Jackie said that this doesn't affect just the sufferer, it affects the family. And we are fully aware of this. It's a really horrendous illness to live with. And it's difficult. It's difficult for everyone. And I agree, we need more intense support to help young people and their families, and also to avoid hospital admission. Because that's one of our aims.
Yeah, obviously anything at the moment to keep anybody out of hospitals a good idea. Parents will be listening to this, grandparents listen to this, Yolanda, carers. What should they be looking out for? What are the sort of the signs that maybe someone might be descending down into an eating disorder?
And I think if parents and grandparents, carers, guardians, if they see that there's a change in the eating behavior, if people stop wanting to eat things that they previously enjoyed, or they want to eat by their own, on their own, they don't want to eat with the family, that's one of the signs. But it's also about people withdrawing themselves, isolating themselves. There's also exercise. Some people start to over-exercise, and they might spend even 2, 3, 4 hours a day exercising. So I think that parents know their children best, and they know when there's a change in their behavior. And I think it's about, trusting your instincts. And if you think that there is something going on, then, very gently approach your child. I would suggest that parents go to a website like Beat first, for instance. There are a lot of tips and a lot of ways, guidance as to how to approach this. And
What's that
then
website again,
have this
Yolanda?
very
Sorry.
delicate conversation. Beat. It's on your. It's actually one of the websites on your website as well.
Yeah.
So it's BE18.
It's up on the
And
the BBC Make a Difference pages there if you want to go
yeah,
and have a look at that. And there's a link I know to it from the Happy Heads pages there. Okay, good.
it is there. Yeah,
Good
and
stuff.
our website is there as well. And I think, that would be a good starting point. And then, have the conversation with your child. I think the difficulty with eating disorders is that often the young person or child will deny the illness. That's the nature of eating disorders. So, don't let this put you off. Eating disorders are not just about food, are about how people feel, are about control, are about, managing their emotions. So have a good conversation with them. And then if you're still worried, go to the GP. The GP will refer to the right service. But trust your instincts. I think that's very important.
Yolanda Duanola, appreciate your time this morning. Clinical lead for RISE, the eating disorder service across Warwickshire, Coventry and Warwickshire with us this morning on BBC CWR. Really impressed with Grace when I spoke to her a couple of days ago. Clearly articulate, clearly intelligent and able to rationalise her thinking and exactly what her mental processes were over the last 4 years that she's been dealing with this disorder and indeed the support that she's had. One of the things that she told me is that the help that is available shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. She would like mental health services to be more personalised, less focused on things like your BMI, your body mass index, and the amount of weight you should be putting on, the amount of calories you should be eating, and more on the person as a whole. She told me that the most important thing, though, to do is to talk.
The risk of relapse is a very big risk, especially because I think the real difficult and dangerous part of an eating disorder is that when you kind of slip into a relapse, it's so much of your brain is telling you to like carry on going, like it's a real fight to kind of remain yourself basically rather than becoming your eating disorder. It's very difficult to be able to take back control of your brain when you're in that sort of situation. And so I think for me the key would be, if anything is happening, like any early warning signs, to let my parents know straight away, because as soon as you start slipping and it starts getting really difficult, it's very difficult to go back. I'm incredibly independent and kind of the mindset of I want to do this all on my own sort of thing, which can be helpful in some parts, but I think I'm learning that it's can also be quite dangerous. And so that's being able to tell people when I'm struggling is something that I'm having to work on as well. But I do recognise that it's really important.